We're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm Anna Tao. I lead marketing at Life Alive, and I'd just like to say that hosting a chat like this, diving into a wellness topic, has been a dream of our teams for quite some time. So thank you for being here. Thanks for helping make that a reality. I'd like to introduce a very special guest. Dr. Naidoo is joining us tonight. She is a Harvard-trained nutritional psychiatrist, a trained chef. I want to get this right, a nutritional biologist, and a best-selling author of 2 books. This is Your Brain on Food and Calm Your Mind with Food. There's no question why she's considered a triple threat in the wellness space. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Naidoo.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Anna, and the amazing team at Life Alive. You know who you are, for inviting me to collaborate on this challenge. And welcome to the people online. I hear we have a very large audience. So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I'm really excited to be here, especially thank you to all of you for taking time out of your day to join us in this important topic.
So I want to tell everyone a little bit about how this partnership came to be. I think it started out with Life Alive following Dr. Uma's work. And I think we've always really admired your work, especially our mutual belief of the connection between what you eat and how you feel. And can you speak to that?
It sort of comes to fruition in the words Life Alive, right? Because how you live your life, how you eat is in fact how you feel. We will chat about the gut-brain connection, and we'll chat about mechanisms of how the food we eat impacts how we feel. But I felt very, very aligned with the mission at Life Alive, how the food is produced, how it's sourced, the sustainability factor, the presentation, all of it just for me, also as a chef, hits the high notes, meaning that it aligns with my ethos around food and the fact that food should be delicious. Healthy food can be delicious. And that's one of the things they do brilliantly. So I felt it was a really good match. And so far, we've really had a lot of fun designing and doing this challenge together.
We have, and let me tell you, we've learned a lot from you in the process too. So who's heard of the challenge that we were putting together this September? Open your mind challenge. Anybody try out the challenge? Anybody? Yes. Challenging themselves this week. We're trying to hit our fiber numbers together. I'm finding it a challenge. The challenge is challenging, I will say. But for those of you that haven't heard about it, we're asking participants to adopt really simple daily habits that can boost your mind and your mood. And that's what we're going to dive into tonight. I'm excited to dig into the science behind the challenge. But first, I'd like to talk about why now? Like, why is this challenge so important? I think maybe we can all relate to this. I think anxiety levels are really rising in our country right now for a lot of reasons. Can you speak a little bit about what's going on right now for all of us?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Anna, because I do feel like one of the reasons that I wrote Calm Your Mind with Food was that during the pandemic, all I saw in my virtual practice was heightened anxiety. People who had not struggled with anxiety ever in their lives were presenting really anxious and worried. And one could understand what was going on in the world. But that continued, but it was borne out by the research. So a very important article published in The Lancet, a highly reputable medical journal, showed that 25%, that there was a 25% increase in anxiety worldwide. And so it kind of made sense clinically in terms of what I was seeing. So I felt that, in addition to the solutions out there, because medications are necessary for some people, but not everyone is looking for a pill. Some people are looking for lifestyle solutions, and nutrition is a pillar of that, right? Because if we eat well, and that's connected to the gut and brain, and it's connected to mood and food, we can actually feel better. So it became important to find ways to walk away from stress eating, step back from ultra processed foods, which are everywhere and very hard to avoid. But to have more whole foods. The thing that I love about the beautiful bowls and dishes and all the meals created here is everything is so sort of carefully put together. And it seems easy to do, but let me tell you, as a chef, it is not. And so I like the fact that they make it easy for me, and that I can order something and feel better. And that's not a sales pitch. I actually genuinely enjoy the food here. And I feel like if we can dissect the science for people, it makes it easy to make a choice about higher fiber in one week or more colors in another week. Or as the challenge unfolds, you'll read about the other weeks as well.
I think let's dig into that science a little bit more. I mentioned that we've, as a team, have been learning a lot. I thought maybe before we started working together, before I read your book, I thought, oh, of course, if you eat healthier, you're going to feel better. I thought I got it, but really digging into that connection between the health of our gut, how it's communicating with our brain, and then how it in turn is going to make your mood balanced or maybe not, and as someone who I've actually struggled with anxiety for a better part of my life. And it was really very eye-opening to maybe some of the things that my behaviors I was doing, like, wow, this really could be impacting me. And can you just speak more about, can you explain that, how that connection and how it all works?
So I like to say that a happy gut is a happy and calm mind. And why do I say that? Because one of the emerging things that occurred in the last 2 decades of research, although if you've heard about Hippocrates, the sort of the father of modern allopathic medicine, or doctors take the Hippocratic oath, he spoke about this connection. But as we all understand, the science and the research had to follow. So the gut and brain are on 2 different parts of the body, but they originate from the exact same cell in the human embryo. And they divide apart and they form 2 separate organs, kind of like twins, but non-identical twins. But they come from the same place, and then they remain connected by the 10th cranial nerve, which is the vagus nerve, which is almost like a 2-way bidirectional superhighway that allows for neurotransmitters to talk between the gut and the brain. But there's more to it, because about 90 to 95% of the receptors are in the gut, as well as made in the gut. So things like serotonin, the happiness hormone, and others have a presence in the gut where food is being digested. So you start to see these pieces fill in. What we eat is interacting with the trillions of microbes in our gut microbiome. And those trillions of microbes are there to help us. They actually help with vitamin production, hormone production, sleep, and circadian rhythm, which is our internal body clock. They help with digestion. They help with immunity. 70% of our immune system is in the gut. They help with mental well-being, how you feel and how you eat. So they busy little people down there doing things, and we can take care of them by eating fiber, eating those colors. In fact, any part of the challenge will help the gut microbiome. But when we take it further, we realize that if what we're eating are fast foods, junk foods, highly sugared foods, and soda, or a ton of artificial sweeteners every day, or unhealthy fats like trans fats or hydrogenated oils, those types of food drive inflammation in the gut. And when you have inflammation, it's sort of an underlying factor that now is being seen to drive and worsen anxiety, depression, cognitive disorders, focus, attention, and more. So anytime we can do something healthy, like we're doing in this challenge to fend off inflammation, we're doing a better thing.
Thank you for explaining that. I think it's just the beginning too. I think I'd love to dive even deeper into that. So can you tell us more about what the good mood foods are?
Right. So the way that I thought about this for the challenge is that the good mood foods will be divided into categories so that all of us, if we participate, if we're not participating and we want to try this out next month, whatever works for you. Oh, that open your mind smoothie is Beautiful.
Good choice.
It's a good choice and it's so pretty. Sorry, always distracted by food, as you can see. But the bottom line is that there are certain foods, but there isn't, I don't believe there's one superfood. I think that it's about the pattern of how you eat. So when you think about dishes that are prepared here and the foods that are included, they hit those goals of, high fiber, whole foods. One of the things and one of the principles of nutritional psychiatry is, eat the whole food, meaning, eat an orange, even zest the skin into your salad. But skip the store-bought orange juice. And by that, I mean the store-bought orange juice in the supermarkets has all the fiber stripped and often added sugar to make it more sweet because Americans tend to have a sweeter palate. So when you start to add these foods, and one way to do it is colors. So think about anthocyanins from blueberries, which are the blueberry foam in the Open Your Mind smoothie. Very powerful antioxidant. Carotenoids from carrots. We have carrots in a lot of the dishes. Lycopene from tomatoes. All those things it's almost groups of food. So what we did is we took the best foods for mood and anxiety and we incorporated almost I can't think of the right word. We sort of thought about how do we have that in concepts that help people. So one way is add colors. Add 5 new colors every day.
Happens to be week 1 of the challenge that we just passed. So eat more colors. And then what's next?
And then eat more fiber. So we also selected dishes that you can choose from, and you can choose any dish, but some dishes that are highlights for that. Then it's add more omega-3s to your diet, and that can be from seafood or plant-based sources, hemp seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds to make a delicious chia pudding for breakfast or actually any time of day. And then the fourth one is adding in fermented foods. So if you've ever tasted like the miso ramen bowl, it has both miso and kimchi in it. So it has 2 fermented foods in it. Some of our smoothies have kefir or different types of yogurt in it, which have that additional process as well.
Do you mind if we go just week by week and have you explain? So what about eating 5 colors a day is going to help my mood?
Right. So I mentioned the trillions of microbes in our gut. So, they need to eat too. Just like we need to eat, they need to eat too. So the way that we can feed them is with fiber. And you can get fiber from plant-based foods. Fiber is really not found in seafood or meats and things like that. Fiber is found in things like plant-based foods, fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, seeds, legumes, and healthy whole grains. And an easy way to feed them is through these different colors. So if you add 5 new colors every single day, and always try to have a green, because leafy greens and the different greens contain folate, which is vitamin B12, vitamin B9. And vitamin B9 has been associated, if it's low, it's also been associated with a low mood. So just making sure that you have a bunch of leafy greens every single day will build up your vitamin B9 or folate levels. So that's an easy tip right there. As for the other colors, you are building up more antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds in your body every single day. Simple thing, add 5, challenge yourself, add 5 more. And even if they overlap, you might get different colors, shades of orange, different colors of peppers. That's all good because they're different foods that you're adding to your diet, but you're also adding those powerful antioxidants. So that's week 1.
I've heard that eating a different color actually feeds a different microbe, like a different microbe's favorite color is red, for example, and a different one is orange. So I'm feeding a variety in my gut and having a more flourishing microbiome. Is that true?
So the diversity of the foods you eat, so 5, add 5 colors every day, adds to the diversity of what you're feeding the microbes. The food that we eat, those foods have their own microbiome. So the microbes from there interacting with what is in our gut. And so you're actually enhancing the microbes, you're enhancing the diversity, you're making them happy. They eat, they choose one color over the other. But what's most important is you will notice yourself starting to feel better when you eat that way. So unless you have a gut or a gastrointestinal condition, which prevents you from, eating certain foods at certain times, you will generally just feel healthier, lighter, with less bloating, less discomfort. And honestly, people will contact me in a week and say they're sleeping better because they didn't realize they were super anxious and couldn't get to sleep. But by starting the healing process of their gut, they're sleeping better. So it's always so interesting clinically and in research to see this happen.
So interesting. All right. So next, week 2 is fiber. And I always think, oh, you need to eat enough fiber for proper digestion. So everything is working correctly. But there's more to it, right?
There's more to it. Fiber is not the orange drink that our grandmas used to take. It's more than that. And doctors need to learn this just as much. So fiber is in the foods that we eat. And they certainly can be in supplemental forms. Certain conditions may need that, but we can get it every day from the food that we eat. Americans tend to worry about protein a lot, but it tends to be, when we look at the research, that we consume a decent amount of protein. We could probably adjust, and for your individual needs, you may need to adjust that. But what we actually don't eat is fiber. And, fiber is easily obtained in the foods that we eat. By eating more fiber, again, we are nurturing those gut microbes. So we're eating well, they're eating well, and you can see that they are over time going to lower inflammation. So that's an important process. As we eat the fiber, the breakdown products in the gut are what we call short-chain fatty acids. And short-chain fatty acids fend off inflammation. They help the gut microbiome. They do only good things in the gut. But when we eat things like fast foods and junk foods or ultra-processed foods, the foods that have a label that's this big and you read them and you're not sure what they are, what those ingredients are, that's usually an ultra-processed food. So that's a good guide. Remember, whole foods don't have, an orange doesn't have a nutrition label. So, a whole food doesn't need a nutrition label because it's just a whole food. But a processed food or ultra-processed food does. So when we eat those types of foods, unfortunately, the breakdown products are toxic, and they're actually called toxic polysaccharides. They break down and they start to damage the gut. And if you've ever heard of a condition called leaky gut, which is the medical term is gastrointestinal permeability, it happens over time from eating poor. One of the ways, nutrition is one of it, stress is another, and there are a few other mechanisms, but one important way is what we eat, because that initial damage happens from those toxic breakdown products.
Makes sense. Interesting. So moving on to week 3, we're asking participants to focus on omega-3 fatty acids. I also know that there's an omega-6 fatty acid. Mm-hmm. How are those different, and why are we asking to focus on omega-3s?
So in the standard American diet or Western diet, we tend to consume a lot of processed and ultra-processed foods, and we tend to change the ratio of what our bodies need. Our bodies need more omega-3s than omega-6. Because of how we eat, there is a tendency to flip that ratio, which leads to inflammation and discomfort and some of these poor mood, high anxiety, but other conditions in our gut, like gas, bloating, discomfort, all of the stuff that is associated with sort of less healthy gut health. So by increasing just what the omega-3 rich foods are, you can get this from fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, sardines, anchovies, but you can also get it from plant-based sources, hemp seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds, walnuts. All of these also have short-chain omega-3s. So adding those into your diet helps with inflammation, it helps antioxidant levels, it helps with more fiber. It really does many, many good things. So in some ways, we're trying to stack different healthy habits in an easy way, and make the challenge not only fun, but before you know it, at the end of the month, if you have followed along, you've kind of gained 4 healthy habits, but you've stacked them all together. So you're eating more color, adding more fiber, adding omega-3s, and then the last one.
I have one specific question. I've been hearing a lot about seed oils. How did those fit into this conversation?
So with seed oils, it's which seed oil and how much you consume of it. You should not, cooking in something like peanut oil is not the healthiest. So if you are, maybe cut back on that and use a more neutral oil like avocado oil. Use your olive oil, which these are rich in other types of healthier fats. Use those for, say, salad dressings. So I think the problem is that there are a lot of seed oils in ultra processed foods. And when we consume a lot of that, that's one of the ways, or even fast foods, one of the ways in which we change that ratio. So by all means, if for example, in culinary school, we used to use something like a little bit of macadamia nut oil to finish a salad. That amount that you drizzle on is not going to be harmful for you. It's when we're eating it in higher amounts that ratio changes, and we start to develop inflammation.
Right. It's not that we should completely avoid omega-6. It's that we just need to be balancing with enough omega-3s. Did I get that right?
That's right. If you increase, if you're eating enough omega-3s, that ratio is going to be the way that we want it and our bodies need it to be. Bodies and very specifically brain needed to be.
All right. Last week 4 is eating fermented foods, which is an interesting challenge. How does this help your gut brain connection?
Right. So fermented foods, a very important study done at Stanford University a few years ago, found that adding fermented foods to your diet lowers inflammation in your gut, which is really helpful for us to know, because fermented foods tend to have that sour, different kind of taste, umami, and you have to get used to it if that's not something you eat all the time. One of my favorite foods is kimchi. I love to add a little bit of it to a salad or soup that I'm eating, but it is an acquired taste. But believe it or not, almost every culture has a fermented food, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, all of these different ones. So think about something that you like and you enjoy and start to add them in. So the way that we did that here is suggested the dishes that already have fermented foods in it for you, and do it slowly, build it up in your gut. And some tips if you want to recreate some of the dishes at home. When you buy fermented foods in the supermarket, buy it from the refrigerated section, because the microbes are still living and they're active, and you want those live active bacteria to be entering your system. That's the health benefit. So has anyone here made their own kombucha or tried fermenting stuff at home? Can you tell people what happens with the bubbling of the... Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's right. So that's how the flavor and sourness develops, but the bubbles are all the gas and the production and the fermentation. So all of that is healthy for us. There are certain, there are conditions under which you do your own fermentation at home. And it has to be done carefully. And I can see that you have the experience to do it, but that type of thing. But if you're buying it from the supermarket, just get it from the refrigerated section. And really, you can get kimchi, you can get plant-based kimchi, because kimchi traditionally has, I think, some type of seafood in it or anchovies. And you can get plant-based version, you can get miso, you can get all of these easily available now.
Wonderful tip. I think you've been covering these along the way, but all in one list, could you tell us more about some of those foods that are maybe working against us in balancing our mood?
Yeah, I think it starts off with, I think that as Americans, we tend to have a large amount of sugar in our foods. And one of the things that we talked about when we designed the smoothies and developed the recipes and spoke about the food is that Life Alive actually pays attention to the levels of added sugar in our food. And it's something really important to look at on a food label as well, because I really believe we need to empower ourselves. So starting off with the big one, which is the added sugars and sort of refined sugars that Americans tend to eat. Things like ketchup and salad dressings, tomato sauce or a pasta sauce that you buy often have added sugar. So always read the label, because food manufacturers, there's some of them trying to be a little healthier. So we have this added sugar, then there's, sodas and candy and cakes and all of that. No one is saying don't have a piece of cake on your birthday. I'm just suggesting don't have that be your everyday 3 times a day meal. So sugar is a big one. Then while we're on that topic, artificial sweeteners in large amounts can be a problem. They're disruptive to the gut. So tiny amount in your tea or something that you're drinking is okay, but not something that you are consuming all the time every day. Another way to sweeten is cinnamon, which has some powerful antioxidant properties, and it actually balances blood sugar. So there's an alternative. But then it's the big group here is ultra processed foods, which you're hearing and seeing everywhere in the news. And these are just foods that if we can find more whole food sources, step back from them, find other ways to eat, is going to help us. So that's a huge one. And then processed foods. Now, I want to explain something. Chickpeas can be technically considered processed, but they're a whole food. When you process a chickpea, it comes as a dried, when it's harvested, a dried legume or dried chickpea, and it's then, pressure cooked and placed in a can. You can just buy a can if you can do canned organic or canned chickpeas, rinse it out and use the chickpea. That is technically processed, but it's still an actual food, right? It's not the way that cauliflower is taken, one of my favorite vegetables, and highly, highly processed and placed into a pizza crust, because not all of those versions are that healthy. It's just kind of, well, you can eat cauliflower, you actually just make the cauliflower. So there's all of those nuances. Other big groups are unhealthy fats like trans fats and hydrogenated oils. And those are and then the one that is pretty obvious is, not only eating fried foods as part of your diet, because those fats tend to be less healthy for us as well. So those are the big ones that you want to be careful about.
Okay, so we've given everyone a ton of information here. Is there anything really simple that we could send everyone away with a homework assignment they could start tomorrow or maybe even tonight that would be easy but would start making an impact?
Okay. So I think that I talk about something called the SAW method, which is SAW. So I have two suggestions. One is on this code, you can get my CALMS guide, which is the foods. That's not just one food, a few foods under CALMS. So when you go to the supermarket, you think, well, let me get that food because this is a way I can build an anti-anxiety shopping cart. That's the one. But the other is a method I called SAW, which I really designed in my clinic to help my patients. S is swap, A is add, and W is walk. And what these mean is for one thing, it's easy to remember, it's SAW. S is swap. So think about one habit or one unhealthy food or beverage that you're drinking. Maybe you're drinking soda. Maybe you're drinking diet soda, which is pumped up with artificial sweetener. Or maybe you're drinking an ultra sweetened iced tea. Or maybe you just have chips every day at lunch because where you go to get your lunch, it's so easy to grab that as the special. Whatever it is that one habit you can step back from to swap. And what can you add in place of that? Get the clementine, get an apple instead of the bag of chips, something that you can swap out easily. The A is to add. What can you add in? Because I do think with nutrition, we live in a kind of a media climate sometimes where it's, eat this and not that, and remove this whole food from your diet or remove this food group. And it gets really hard for people. So I'm much happier talking about what we can add into our diet. And that's how we design the challenge. What can we add in? What can we add the colors, add the fiber, add the omegas, and add the fermented foods rather than take this away or take that away? Because what you notice is as you add things in, your body is satiated and you start to cut back on the kind of junk foods because your body's not craving them anymore. So adding something in that's beneficial. By the way, one important one is water, because hydration is super important. When you dehydrated, you can be more anxious, and low hydration is associated with a low mood. So you can actually even be a bit more depressed. And thank you for the demo.
I got thirsty there.
And then the W is for walk, but walk is a large category of maybe you will need to exercise more. Maybe, you gave up your gym membership. Believe it or not, this has still happened. People gave up their gym membership during COVID and they didn't go back. So whatever your particular situation is, walking could be adding in meditation, a mindfulness practice, a gratitude journal. It could be spending time in nature, which is called Shinrin-yoku in Japanese culture, but really it's spending time in nature. If you're in the middle of the city, you can, walk through a walk on the Boston Common or walk in a park. That's another way to do it. But those types of things are important to add in, but also exercise is a basis because exercise has a good amount of evidence to improve mood and lower anxiety. And people who exercise know that. So the W can be exercise, but it can also be these other integrated and holistic practices. So SAW, you choose where you want to start. You can start with W, you can start with S, you can start with A, but do something that starts you on your journey that you can pair up with this Open Your Mind challenge and the foods that you are eating.
I love that. I love that idea of what can I add versus what do I have to restrict? I think that works better with my psyche a little bit rather than having all these no's in my life. What can I say yes to? So I love that. So wrapping it up here a little bit, our challenge is just 4 weeks long. Is that long enough to start to feel any noticeable difference? What could someone expect to feel during that time period and beyond?
Exactly. So 4 weeks, sir. 4 weeks is definitely enough time to start to notice a change. Believe it or not, the gut microbes start to react to emotions within about 2 to 24 hours of that. So say you have an argument with a coworker at work, or you're upset about something related to your spouse or your family, the microbes start to react. You may not feel it. So they are very sensitive to your emotional response. When we think about it, though, the more times that we can add in healthy foods and healthy habits, like we've been talking about, you really start to feel better over time. So let's break it down. You might within a week start to notice improved sleep. Some people have noticed better focus because what they're doing is they're working on reducing inflammation in the gut. But for a lot of people, around the 1 to 2 week mark is where they start to notice a difference. And because it's so highly personalized to your own gut, what my gut is doing is different from what Anna's gut is doing, and what my microbes are doing is different to that. Our diets are different. So it really is much more personalized now. So our response times may be different, but I've seen it in my practice, I've written about it, and I've done the research, and I do feel like if you make these slow and steady habits, adding in foods, building up these, what I like to say, stack your habits, and that's how I thought about the challenge together with the team, you will notice a change over a month. It will be steady. And the thing that I love the most is when people contact me and say, I feel so good that I want to continue this, right? Because that's the whole reason. That's really what moves it forward.
That's awesome. I think we're gonna turn it to the audience soon and ask to see if anyone has any questions for Dr. Uma. But any closing thoughts before we do that?
No, I'm really excited to hear what people's experiences have been or their questions. I feel like I've shared our sort of mutual alignment around this challenge and what our hopes and goals are for everyone. But we are here to be part of this with all of you. So thank you for coming.
All right. Amazing. So if anyone has any questions, Lily is going to come around with the microphone. And those of you on the live stream, Lily is also doing a lot of jobs and is seeing what you're typing in to the chat as well. So see our first question right here in the front. Yeah, here we go.
Hi, what do you think of substituting traditional medicines like prednisone with an anti-inflammatory diet, and what can the outcome be? The same, better, worse?
I think that's a challenging question, and I'll break it down for you. Prednisone is a very powerful medication, and it has very many different applications. And in certain conditions, prednisone is life-saving. So it really depends on the person's condition, how much their doctors feel that they need. For example, in respiratory conditions, it will significantly help breathing, right? But that does not mean that an anti-inflammatory diet alongside that medication, it's kind of a symphony. It doesn't mean that that can't be helpful. So my suggestion is always communicate with your doctor. Can you cut back? Can you have a lower dose? How much of this do I need? And also pursue eating this anti-inflammatory diet, because adding the colors, adding the fiber, all of these are principles that add to that.
Hi, it's a treat to see you. I work in outpatient mental health, and I'm curious how you would envision or do envision nutritional psychiatry fitting into a like traditional outpatient mental health setting with psychiatry and therapy. And what would you like to see change, or what do you think needs to change in the industry for that to be, how it should be?
It's a great question. Thank you. So, my mission and goal around this is to have this really integrated into mental health care, not just nationwide, but worldwide. And, we start small, we slowly grow, but the first level is education and awareness for clinicians. And that's where I've tended to focus my attention, because only 20% of our US medical schools teach enough nutrition, so doctors are not equipped. But then in mental health, it's not just the doctors, it's the entire team. And if you work in an outpatient setting, that's pretty much how we practice. So some of those education efforts at Mass General have been through the Mass General Psychiatry Academy. We've designed 2 courses so far, which are several years old, that people take asynchronously. So we have people from Malaysia who take it. We have local clinicians take these courses. These are the bare bones of starting to practice or use this in your practice to talk about nutrition, use the principles of nutritional psychiatry. And now we're building on that to include a nutrition for clinicians course that we're developing right now. So the way that I have had to take a step back and think about it is to build an army of people who can do this work. It's encouraging the clinicians of all stages of career that want to do this work, but offering them the education, because without that, they can't help their patients. It doesn't mean they have to be a nutritional psychiatrist. My path was pretty unique, but they can learn the principles. And that's what everyone needs. It's not just measuring salt and being careful of that for hypertension. Doctors need to know more, but so do other clinicians, because now our medical system is really multidisciplinary teams, and that's what we need.
I think we're going to pop over to the chat. We have some great ones coming in on the Q&A via Zoom. Thank you to all of you for writing in. Dr. Uma, does caffeine or coffee specifically affect the gut-brain connection positively or negatively?
Coffee is a very interesting ingredient, let me say, because coffee beans are rich in plant polyphenols. So my guidance around coffee, for example, coffee is in one of our smoothies, probably more than one, but we had a tasting last night and it's in one of the smoothies. And it's actually a positive ingredient if coffee is something that you drink. Some people can't tolerate even a decaf or half calf. It makes them too anxious or jittery or uncomfortable. Then coffee is not for you. But for those of us who consume coffee, it's healthy for the brain, it's healthy for cognition, it's healthy for the gut, it helps the liver, it does a lot of positive things. Each person is different. So it's about not adding, 8 sugars and junky kind of ultra-processed creamers. Or if you are, as some of us are, just start to cut back on it and think of great ways to make that coffee creamy if you like it with a little bit of milk. My tip is homemade hemp milk, which is really rich and creamy and easy to make. So yes, coffee is good if you tolerate it, and be careful. If you don't, that may not be for you.
I have a question to add on there, though. Is there a limit to where some of those beneficial properties stop?
Yeah.
Asking for a friend.
That's I'll respond from a friend. So the research has shown that over 400 milligrams in a day can kind of upset the balance for anxiety, certainly. So my guidance now, we all drink different types of coffee, different brews, different strands. So my guidance is 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 cups early in the day. And by cups, I mean, not our 20-ounce mugs, but just an average size cup, 8 to 10 ounces. But see how you feel. I will tell you, I have made this mistake myself. Even though I talk about it, I've made this mistake where once I was heading to a podcast, but I'd flown the night before and I needed to be alert. And it was before my book launch, so I had to get all of these things in. So I drank coffee on the plane. I got up, I went to the hotel, I drank coffee and big cups. These were, regular size. And before the podcast, I was jittery. And I thought, wow, what a thing to do to myself. So I hydrated, drank a lot of water, made sure I stopped and I ate something. So I had food, in my gut, and then I calmed down after that. So it's so easy for me, my limit is like that 2.5 cups. You discover that for yourself. And the reason I say that, it's going to be hard for you to figure out the 400 milligrams in the coffee you drink. But that guidance helps. Also drink it by noon or latest 2 o'clock because it will affect your sleep.
Thank you. Right.
I'm jumping back in the audience here.
Hi, thank you so much for all of this. I had a question about dairy, just because I feel like there's like a lot of noise in the media with the anti-dairy people, pro-dairy people. Is it inflammatory? Is it not? What is your thought on dairy? And should it be an ingredient to avoid? Is it kind of like coffee, like figure out your limit? Like, what are your thoughts on it?
It is sort of, in my opinion, and this is because my nutrition opinion and how we eat is very inclusive of people. So irrespective of what I personally eat, I will always respond to my patients or clients or information in the media around what that person eats, because I believe that's respectful of others. So when it comes to dairy, similar to coffee, if it works for you, that's okay. But my guidance about dairy is, if you are consuming dairy, there's a lot of information about dairy farming in the US. I would always suggest, if you can, getting grass-fed yogurt or grass-fed milk, getting something that is organic when you can, if that's something you consume. If you're consuming it and you don't feel well, then dairy is not for you, because there's a very high percentage of people who are lactose intolerant. And so it may not be working for your gut or for you. And then there are lots of other alternatives. The reason I mention hemp milk as an alternative is you can make it yourself, because some of the milks are processed and they may not be bad, but you can also just do it on your own. Same thing with cheese, if you can get grass-fed and you consume that. But again, if dairy is not for you, if you're uncomfortable with anything around the ethics, the dairy farming, or how it makes your body feel, there are lots of alternatives now. There are cashew cheeses and all sorts of things that you can do, coconut yogurts and things like that. So I think it's an individual choice. And if you do consume dairy, then try to get healthier versions.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, thank you. As we go about trying to add these new foods into our diet, do you have any guidelines about things to be careful about? For example, things I've heard certain fish might have more mercury, and certain spirulina is a supplement, but I've heard it might have heavy metal contamination. So are there gotchas like this that you're aware of?
Right. So there's two things there. With supplements, if you are taking a supplement, or say you're adding something to a smoothie, our Open Your Mind smoothie has blue spirulina in it, but it's well sourced. We know where it comes from. That is a very careful consideration, certainly here. But if you are, say, taking that at home or buying it, you can look at sites like consumerlab.com. I believe it's a subscription, but they rate supplements and powders and all sorts of things. So if you're careful and you want to make sure you get a better version versus the marketing, that's one way to do it. When it comes to food, there's guidance around foods that are just fish, even that are better for you. Salmon, generally, if it's wild salmon, and places like Whole Foods and a lot of the supermarkets now, especially in the Boston area, have wild salmon. Some people don't necessarily like the flavor, but it's probably a better option for you. If you are interested in, say, a different kind of fish, finding out from things like the seafood board or that type of fish, the levels of mercury. And if it's something, say, you really love and you find delicious, having it once in a while is okay. We just don't want that to be the way that you add your omegas into your diet. So that's the guidance around seafood. With almost almost any food, you're going to find a documentary that tells you not to eat it. So you really have to make the choice based on educating yourself and enjoying the foods that you like, but then finding the best versions of them, and always in moderation. Right?
What is your take on having a diet that includes no refined sugars? And why would that be important or not important?
I think it is important for those who can do it. I think it's really hard to do. I've had people remove refined sugars and do well and sustain it, but they are very, very determined. They exclude many things from their environment, anything with refined sugar, but they've been able to do it. But that's an individual choice. For a lot of other people, it will certainly help your brain health. It will help your gut health. But for other people, they don't want to live in that level of extreme. So I think, again, it comes back to individual choice. If you're going to remove refined sugars, then there is a way to do it. And I think that I feel myself that could be a little restrictive, but some people like to do it. So it's up to you. I think it's a good thing, but I don't think we have to do it. I think there are other ways to the principle of how we designed this challenge. Adding in layers of good, healthy foods to your dietary habits will help you in a way that over time, you will naturally lower your sugar just by eating more whole foods and fruit.
Kind of on the flip side of that, what about artificial sweeteners? What is their impact on the gut microbiome, and why would someone avoid or not avoid them?
Right. So for the most part, a lot of our foods have a lot of artificial sweeteners, meaning if you're going for a low sugar, sometimes it's sugar-free, but it has a sweetener in it. They, even like an iced tea that's, however it's labeled, basically has a sweetener to sweeten it. That level of consuming it, or say a diet soda. I had a colleague who used to drink 8 diet sodas a day. And, when we learned all of the stuff, he really started to cut back on it because that amount that we're consuming is disruptive to the gut. So one thing is the amount. The second thing is which type of artificial sweetener. So the newer artificial sweeteners, allulose, erythritol, monk fruit, some of them in tiny and in moderation. I am not a fan of the baking mixes that people have. I think that's the food industry just taking it in the wrong direction. So I'm saying a little bit in your tea or something sweetened is okay. But when you're consuming it, be aware of the amount and be aware of which artificial sweeteners, because the older ones have a lot of negative evidence for gut health.
Hello. Thank you so much for your talk. It's been really interesting and I've really been enjoying doing the challenge.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been on a gut journey unrelated to this, but it's been really great to add this in. And I found out that like eating dairy has not been positive for me.
For you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I've also noticed like with that change, with these additions, feeling more satiated. And I wonder, like, once the challenge passes, how can we think about keeping it up and really making sure to, continue thinking about all these positives when we're not tracking it or really thinking about it over the month?
Right. Great question. So I'm not getting any commission from this, but you can always order your meals from Life Alive because they have the components in it. I'm not kidding. I've looked at it all. But so that's one way in all seriousness is that so in culinary school, right, we were taught to make, I'll just take the example of a very special French broth. And we were taught to make it from scratch and you do all of this stuff. And it's really complicated, but it's deliciously tasting. But we were also taught a principle of find things in the food industry that help you as a chef. So there may be a really great organic version of that you can get without preservatives and junk in it that you can use. So you're not spending 6 hours in the kitchen making the broth, right? So in a similar way, I feel that when you can include a restaurant or foods that help your week, your 7 days in that week, maybe a few lunches or maybe a few dinners, it's important to do that. And we've outlined where you're getting the fiber, the colors, the fermented foods, and the omegas from. That's the one thing. The second thing is try slowly putting it together for yourself. So a plate would look like a plate with our 4 weeks of the challenge would look like a lot of different colors in a salad. It would look like a piece of salmon or maybe some hemp seeds and flax seeds sprinkled on your salad with some walnuts. It would look like, a bit of kimchi added into the mix. Your source of protein, that's your choice. It could be tofu, it could be salmon. And then so I've covered, which one have I forgotten? Fiber. So fiber is in all of those, right? So that could be a way to take the 4 weeks and put it into one plate. And that's where I think a lot of plates here do have those ingredients. But if you're making stuff at home and you're trying to cook, that's a way to incorporate it, put those 4 ideas in one plate. And believe it or not, it's not that hard. Because A, fibers in all of them, and B, except the fish, but and B, it's you've learned the principle. And one of the very important things you said that will help you is you feel satiated. Because when you're not, craving a cookie after lunch or a bag of popcorn after dinner or whatever it might be, ice cream, whatever the habit is, you just make healthier choices. And I see it in my clinic all the time.
Another thing that you've mentioned tonight is habit stacking.
Yes.
Can you speak to how that might help you to keep some of these habits going? What habit stacking means?
So, there are different, some research says that, it takes X number of days to learn a habit. And I think it does vary for people, but habit stacking is similar to what I think about with, say, exercise. So let me compare the two. A patient of mine some years ago couldn't fit an hour of exercise into her day because she had a child, she was a single parent, and she wanted to exercise in the morning. And we made this simple shift that completely changed what she was doing. So her goal was 150 minutes of exercise in the week, but she couldn't get in 3 hours. So she broke it up into half-hour sessions. And she enrolled with a trainer and a class online, and she did half hours every morning before her son got up. So that was an example of she stacked it up, but she completed the task. In a similar way, we can do that with habits and with food. In my opinion, I think feeling satiated and not having cravings around just out every day and making those choices will help us build in these healthy habits. So the 4 weeks of the challenge are actually stacking 4 healthy habits that we should be adding in to our diet and to our lives.
What do you think, Lily? Maybe 3 more questions? I think there was one in the back that I saw. You have one here, and then we'll get that one.
And I think
Sounds lovely. Let's start with the chat here. So a great one on here is, how can you actually tell if your gut microbiome is out of balance? Maybe what are some of those symptoms that you feel to recognize that?
Sure. So great question. We'll start off with the gastrointestinal symptoms, more gas, bloating, discomfort, uncomfortable bathroom habits. All of that could signify, even pain sometimes can signify an unhealthy gut. But it also could be increased anxiety, poor sleep, and a low mood, not having the energy, not having the focus. It could be any one of those things really tie back to gut health. A lot of Americans, a study showed that only 12% of Americans are metabolically fit and healthy. So a lot of us are actually walking around with some level of gut inflammation. That doesn't mean we have to be perfect, but paying attention to it, certainly through the food that we eat, is one way to target that. So those are some of the ways that you'll get an impression that your gut is not doing as well as it could be.
Hi, I work in GI, so I was curious, what recommendations you would have for people who have gastrointestinal conditions like IBS or like a bacterial overgrowth who want to add fiber and all those other great things to their diet.
Such a good question, because when we designed the challenge and we wrote the blogs and wrote the content to go along with the challenge, we mentioned specifically that if you have a GI condition, consult with your doctor. You may need to take this very slowly. You may or may not be able to do all aspects of the challenge. For example, fermented foods may be too uncomfortable for you if you have SIBO or Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. And that way you might have to do it slightly differently and at not as high a pace. So maybe every other day or, in consultation with your doctor, because those are special conditions that you may need to heal your gut, but you may have to do it slightly differently. You may need other medications or other methods involved. So I think that's a great question because it factors not everyone. It's when I use my PowerPoint slides, I always have a slide with what I call nutritional psychiatry nuances, and that's the first one. It's we not all of us can do this, especially with the number of people with gut issues. Mm-hmm. By the way, I have a lot of people who see a gastroenterologist and come back and tell me, my doctor told me there's no such thing as leaky gut. So
my question is, have you written a cookbook?
Oh, you and my editor. Right. Thank you. Yeah.
Mood.
Yes. So both my books have entire chapters with recipes. And the recipes are designed to match up with the content of the book. So in Calm Your Mind with Food, that's the book here. We have a whole anti-anxiety protocol and the recipes match that. It's definitely on my bucket list to write something with just recipes because people do come to us for that. So thank you for suggesting it again. But right now the recipes on the books.
All right, I think that concludes the evening. If you wouldn't mind thanking Dr. Uma for her time.
Thank you all for coming.
And I think we'll be up here for a few minutes if you want to just come and say hi. And of course, we encourage you to have a bite to eat. You can mention the word mood at the register and get 20% off for attending our talk. So eat up. And thanks again for coming. We loved having you.